Welcome to a Seasoned Caring podcast where there's hope for living, loving, and caring with no regrets. This is Rayna Neises, your host, and today I have special guest Jane Daly. Jane is an author, speaker, teacher based in Oregon. She served on the boards of Inspired Christian Writers as well as West Coast Christian Writers and regularly teaches the craft of writing at workshops and conferences up and down the West Coast. An award-winning author, Jane's first two books, Because of Grace, Hallway Publishing, 2015, and The Caregiver Season, Finding Grace to Honor Your Aging Parents, Focus on the Family, 2016, established her as a moving nonfiction voice. Jane navigates all genres effortlessly. Having written articles, essays, flash fiction, and a regular blog, she is nearing completion of 2 novels in progress and has been anthologized in several publications. When not teaching, speaking about, or practicing writing, Jane can be found in the financial district, where she's the branch officer at a community bank. Welcome, Jane. I'm so excited to have you today.
Thank you, Rayna. It's great to be here.
I'm so excited to have you here today. I've just been so inspired by the Caregiving Season, Finding Grace to Honor Your Aging Parents, and just the message behind it. So share with our listeners, what was most surprising that you discovered in caring for your parents?
What I first discovered was that, like many women, even men, but it seems like mostly women, we slip into this caregiving role without realizing that we're doing it. You can think about that old analogy of the frog in the water. If you put it in a pan of water and it's perfectly content and you gradually raise the temperature of the water, that the frog will eventually boil. And we tend to, as women, think, well, we're the ones who should be caring for our parents. And that's what happened to me, as I'm sure probably happened to you and a lot of your listeners, is we slip into this role, all of a sudden we're deep into it, and we look back and go, how did I get here?
I completely agree. I think that's one of the things I keep talking to people about is be intentional from the very beginning, because there are a lot of things that they don't need you to do. They just need done.
Exactly. I was just talking with a friend today whose mother is in an assisted living. Actually, she's kind of in a temporary place between hospital and assisted living. And she was telling me, your voice keeps in my head telling me to stop, because my mom will ask me to stop and get something for her at the store. And I'll tell her, you don't need that. Mom, you don't need that. You said you wanted to diet. So why are you having me pick up, bags of chips? And she said, but I hear your voice in my head saying, just get her the chips. Just get your mom what she wants. And that's kind of what we have to do as we've switched into this parental role of, no, you don't need that. When what I learned is I had to take a step back and say, okay, my mom has lost her independence. She has a craving. Let's say she has a craving for chocolate cake. She can't just go to the store and get her chocolate cake. So she relies on me. She doesn't need me to say, Mom, you don't need chocolate cake, because I know you're going to eat that for breakfast.
And that's okay. If you want chocolate cake, do you eat chocolate cake for breakfast every now and then?
I don't really like cake. So I have been known to eat leftover popcorn for breakfast because I happen to love crunchy salty, whereas my mom was a incredible sweet addict. So she would have whatever happened to be sweet for breakfast, donut, bear claw, whatever was in the house. And after dinner, it was always like C's candy or fudge or something that was chocolate and sweet.
Mm-hmm. I think sometimes we just forget, like you said, that they're adults and they've been making their own decisions, eating cake or donuts or whatever they want a long time. So just because we're in a point where they're not as independent as they once were doesn't mean they should stop making their own decisions. I totally agree.
It's true. Although there comes a time where I want you to make decisions, and there's certain decisions that they just, for instance, my mom just stopped having the energy to make some decisions. So she would want me to decide how much to send the kids, the grandkids on their birthdays, or what do you want for dinner? I don't care, you decide. Just, those types of things where we do have to step into that decision making or quote unquote parental role. But then there's other times where, yeah, she's capable of making the decision. She just doesn't want to. But the other times are when she wants something and she wants it now. That's where I talk a lot about grace. I mean, I cannot even explain how much I learned over this whole caring for my dad and then my mom, and just the grace that God just pours out when we ask it and pours out when we need it. And sometimes I wasn't too graceful, but I learned grace.
Mm-hmm, for sure. It's funny because I talk about using a manifesto in my book, and the manifesto that I wrote during my caring season, the very last thing, God was really working on me with grace, that I would extend grace. I would be grace always to everyone. And it wasn't because I was, but because I needed to learn to be that and to really be conscious of it and aware of it, and extending the grace to those that were helping us in their caregiving roles, and the one we're taking care of, and to ourselves. It can be hard to do that as well.
Yes, right. We have to be able to give ourselves grace because we know that there's going to be times when we're feeling really ungraceful. Just, I don't want to be doing this. I don't want to, like in your case, I don't want to drive 220 miles every week to care for my father. It's a long drive and I'm not feeling it today. I'd rather be home.
Mm-hmm.
And so we have to be able to, yes, experience God's grace in our own life, knowing that sometimes we just have to kind of fake it till we make it.
Mm-hmm. And like you said, he's always so faithful to give us the grace that we need in order to then turn around and give it to others.
Well, and especially when as caregivers, we experience a lot of guilt. And I don't know, I'm assuming you did, because I'm sure you're, probably the same as I am, is that part of it is, am I doing enough? And could I have done it differently? Could I do more? I was angry and I was sharp with my parent at that time. And so I'm feeling really guilty that I denied my mom something. I told a story that my husband and I lived right down the street from my mom. And when we would leave, we would drive by her house and she would always call, "Where are you going?" And we'd be like, we're just going to go do errands, when we were really planning to go out to eat. And so we started going out a different way when we wanted to hide, because we didn't want my mom to see us. So we would drive out a different direction so we wouldn't drive in front of her house. And then would come the inevitable guilt. Well, maybe we should have asked mom to go with us. She'd probably really like to get out of the house because she's housebound. But we kind of need this time by ourselves too. So it's that whole guilt and being able to give ourselves grace. No, it's okay. We need some time by ourselves. We eat with her every single night,
Yeah, that constant feeling of being torn. We talk about on the podcast a lot. Our goal is to walk them all the way home and still have a life that we love. And that's the balance that's so hard, of really being able to be there to support and to love and to offer them what they need, but at the same time have a life, because so many times as caregivers, we give up that life, and that's not healthy. And that's really not honoring to them, because they want us to have a life. They want us to, not lose our marriage, not lose our relationships or our jobs. Those things are important as well.
Yeah. And it's really important too that I know we've heard a lot, self-care. Self-care is like a big buzzword right now. But it is something that we do need to be aware of, is that caregiver burnout is one of the biggest stresses or outcomes of caregiving, is just being burned out because we never get a break, or we very rarely get a break. Or in your case, having to drive down, that's a long drive to take care of somebody. It's not a long drive, it's 220 miles is great if you're going on vacation and you know that you're going to end up at the beach or in a condo somewhere. But when it's knowing that you're going to work and it's really hard. So I think for me, just being able to have my husband around, he also helped, but he would encourage me to, why don't you just stay home tonight and I'll take dinner to mom. I'll sit with mom. You stay home and just have some alone time. Because for me, the alone time is what feeds me. I'm not a extrovert. I'm more of an introvert. So that time alone feeds my spirit. And knowing yourself, I think you need to be aware of, what is it that I need? Do I need to be in a party with friends because that's going to rejuvenate me enough to come back to care for a parent? Or is it going to be, I need to be alone for a couple hours and just read a book or watch a Hallmark movie and get my spirit filled back up then?
That's so wise. And that's one thing we talk about self-care all the time because, like you said, I actually cringe when I say the word because you hear it so often. And as a caregiver, you're just like, whatever, I don't have time for that. But the key is really making
Right.
it that's something that's kind of built into your life. It's something that you do because you need it, not because it's a luxury. And so realizing how you're wired and what gives you energy or what gives you joy definitely has to be considered and needs to be regularly scheduled, is the way I say it.
Mike and I found that during this whole season, my dad died many years before my mom. I think 7 or so years before my mom died. So we had this whole time of my mom getting worse and worse. And then, of course, caring for her. So when she was no longer to even walk down to our house, we took dinner to her every single night and ate with her and just fed her basically because she wasn't really eating well. And we brought up the fact that we needed some time. Mike and I needed some time just to have dinner by ourselves, or we called it date night. We said we need 2 nights a week where we can have date night. And my mom first kind of fell apart about that. Like, what? You don't want to be with me? And she kind of threw a little bit of a hissy fit and pouted until she had a chance to realize, you're right. You guys do need some time. So we did Thursday and Saturdays we called it date night. And most of the time we didn't even go out. We just sat at home and ate dinner by ourselves. And I would just sit there across the table from him going, I'm so happy to just have you across the table and nobody else in this room. It was so nice to just have the two of us. And those are the kinds of things that we need to be aware of when we're caregiving, that maybe it's just as simple as having a dinner with your husband or your
Mhm.
family alone, not having that responsibility.
Right.
I know everybody's story is different, but just being aware of what are your needs. And
Right.
maybe a lot of your needs are set aside for this season, but some of your needs still need to be met.
I totally agree. And I think that's the part that's so important about realizing what it is that you need and realizing that's your self-care. And that's okay. And that's important so that you do have what you need to get all the way to the end of the journey. So, if there was one piece of advice that you would give someone who's a caregiver of a family member, what would it be?
Don't hesitate to reach out for help. When Mike and I first started this caregiving season, number one, did not even know that there were resources available. Uh, So I didn't even know what I didn't know. And so I didn't know that there was places where I could read blogs and get encouragement and find answers. And then the other thing is so it kind of goes in with this, is to reach out for help. Ask friends if they can help. Can they watch mom or dad for an hour or two so you can get away and do something that you need to do? Or can your friends or your people at church or if anyone in your community, can they help you? Can they run some errands for you? That's something that I kind of and I talk about this in my book, is that I kind of kept this very close to me. Is like, I am the one who's going to care for my mom because I'm the daughter. That's what we do. And so that wanting to control and keep everybody else out is a really dangerous place to be.
So how far in your journey did you realize you were doing that? And did you start to reach out and ask for help?
It wasn't until the end. I'm
Mm.
kind of a slow learner. So it wasn't really until the end, until I started asking, can you, especially at the very end when my mom was back home and she had been given 2 weeks to live. And Mike and I desperately wanted to go to a fellowship gathering of our church, of like a Bible study potluck thing. And I asked someone, could you maybe just come over and stay? My mom was like comatose, but could you come over and just sit? And she was so willing to do it. She said, absolutely, it would be an honor. I'll just sit in her room and I'll play some Christian music and I'll read out loud to her, even if, we don't know if she can hear. But she said, I would be blessed to do that. And as I said, I'm kind of a slow learner. So I didn't find out until the very end that, hey, it's okay to let other people in.
Well, I'm glad you learned it. And I hope if you have a season again, that you'll be quicker to ask for help and to allow the help, because that is one of the hardest things. I'm not sure why. It's interesting, as I talk to caregivers, a lot of times it sounds like either the parent or the loved one isn't open to having someone else in, or the person who's caring isn't open to having someone else in. And so it's really difficult because it is exhausting. And to really make the long journey, I'm glad you had your husband, because it sounds like you let him in. But other than that, it was something you did on your own.
I often told my mom that I said, I believe that you love Mike more than you love me. And she would always deny it. But seriously, I think between the two of us, he was her favorite. He knew how to get along with her. And he has such a gift of giving himself. And he was more than happy to do a lot of the like social interaction. Because as I said, I'm kind of an introvert. So I come home from work and I'm sitting at dinner. A lot of times I don't want to talk. And so, but my mom needs that. She needs someone to talk to her. So Mike would start talking. He could talk to a door and make it answer. But yeah, letting other people in is really important, and it will help you keep your sanity.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds like you were working all day, so you were peopled out, whereas your mom was isolated all day. So she was craving that relationship and that conversation. And so that was difficult. So it was good that he was there to bridge that gap for you.
Yes, my mom was a super social person when she
Mm-hmm.
was physically able to be. She played bridge a couple times a week. She went to a ladies' Bible study. Back in the day, she and my dad did square dancing a couple nights a week. And
Wow.
so they were always busy, and they had friends over and just, going on trips. And so to be stuck inside with nobody to talk to all day was really hard for her. And
Mm-hmm.
I didn't realize how hard it was until later on, as we became closer and closer, because we eventually moved in with my mom before she died, like 7 months before she passed. So we moved in with her, and she loved that. She loved having us around because she was so used to having friends and people and doing stuff. So yeah, when you lose your independence, and that's the thing that triggers that grace, is knowing this person lost their independence. They can't get out. They can't think. Maybe they can't communicate, or if they've had a stroke, or in your case, your parents had dementia. I mean, just losing your ability to be cognitively aware. And sometimes they realize it and sometimes they don't. But there's that grace that we have to give that lets us know that we can give them grace even if we don't feel like it.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree. So important. I so appreciate, and again, listeners, I would definitely have the Caregiving Season, Finding Grace to Honor Your Aging Parents, on the shelf. It is an encouraging read. It really is one that lets you shift your thinking a little bit in those times when maybe you haven't been thinking, maybe you're not feeling the grace you need to, and you just need to be reminded of it, that there's lots of great information in Jane's book. So Jane, tell us a little bit about what you've been up to lately.
I am excited because I have decided to dip my toe into the fiction waters, and I kind of like the temperature. So coming on July 21st, my first novel is releasing. It's being published with Elk Lake Publishing, and it's called The Girl in the Cardboard Box. So I'm very excited about that coming. And then I actually just signed another contract with the same publisher to publish a book that is called Broken. Both of these are women's fiction. My books tend to be stories that help women answer the why question in the context of pain and loss. Because I think we've all experienced pain and loss. And so how do we deal with it? How do we look at it from a different perspective? And then the other thing I'm working on is I just signed a contract with a marriage and family counselor to ghostwrite a book on marriage, on the foundations of marriage. So I'm kind of busy and working full time still. And I have 3 grandkids, but I like to be busy. I get bored easily.
A full life is a good thing. So, and
yes.
That will be so exciting to be able to read fiction. I love fiction as a caregiver. It was a way to escape and still be present where I needed to be, but also allow myself to kind of venture into someone else's world. So I'm a reader for sure and really enjoy that. So I'll be looking forward to checking out those new fiction books that you have coming out. And how can people reach out to you?
You can reach out to me through my website, Jane S as in Sam, Jane S Daly, DALY.com. And on my website is a way to sign up for my newsletter. I don't spam people. I generally send maybe one a month, and I call it Jane's Very Short Newsletter because it is pretty darn short. So I'm also on Facebook as Jane Daly, not with the S, and on Twitter and on, oh my goodness, all of the social media. It's a little insane, but you have to be there. And I like reading about other people's lives. So, but the best place is really on my website. There's a contact form, so you can email me at jane@janesdaily.com. I answer all my emails and would be happy to hear from your listeners about their caregiving stories.
That would be great. And I did check out your website, and there's some great blog articles that you shared about caregiving there as well. So definitely look for Jane at www.janesdaily.com. And like she said, feel free to reach out and get in contact. Thank you so much. Our time is gone already. I really appreciate the opportunity to just talk with you today and be able to hear a little bit more about your caregiving with your mom and dad, and just to offer the encouragement to our listeners.
Well, thank you, Rayna. It's been great being with you and to hopefully encourage your listeners and you as well. God bless.
Thank you. Just a reminder, a Season of Caring podcast was created for the encouragement of family caregivers. If you have financial, medical, or legal questions, please consult your local professionals and take heart in your season of caring.